I take it that it is appropriate for me ukuthi ngicale ukuthi ngiphakamise abakwaMathe ngoba basizalela intombi, basizalela umama, basizalela ugogo, basizalela ukhokho kwaPoqo. Let me tell you what a great honor it is to have been invited to deliver this inaugural tribute lecture. I would like personally to thank Black House Collective and Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe Trust for ensuring that we honor our women and heroines while they're still alive. My special greetings to both the Sobukwe and Mathe families here represented. And greetings to all honored guests who have come to give dignity to this historic and momentous occasion. Ma-Africa, I stand here today as an African woman at a time when our contributions in the liberation struggle are erased and silenced. The role of women in politics is not afforded the seriousness it deserves. Yeah. As women, we are seen as inferior, incompetent, mainly because our politics are built from a Western, male-centered tradition. Where power is gendered and politics is supposedly a men's job. In her intriguing novel, Half of a Yellow Sun, Nigerian writer Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi speaks about the danger of single story, questioning ideas that perpetuate single narratives and horrendous erasures. Her work echoes the fact of our lived experience that our voices are muted and silenced. In this way, the voice and abuse against African women is not only ensured, it is normalized. As a result, we continue to witness the appalling conditions and the inferior status afforded to African women. Black women in the post-1994 setup find themselves at the bottom rungs of well-intentioned policies that purport to serve women's rights and promote our dignity. Sadly, we continue to suffer the harshest conditions that this neo-colonial that democracy has to offer. Very recently, as we can recall, a scourge of femicide where over 63 black women were raped and brutally murdered shook the very foundations of our makeup and social fabric. The brutal killings of Karabo Mokoena, Tinyuko Ngobeni, 3-year-old Kevin Peters, and best friends Poppy Kwame and Bongeka Pungula, at best embarrassed those at the helm of power. But that embarrassment did not trigger a powerful response that one expects from the powers that be. Instead, these victims were met with cold and disaffected legalities. Outside hollow legal recourse, provisions and deafening silence even from those who claim to stand for women could be heard ringing. As a result, violence and abuse against women continues unabated. Earlier this week, the news and social media were buzzing with reports that the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Mduduzi Manana, beat up and injured 2 women at a nightclub. Ooh, the telling irony of it is that he is still the Deputy Minister. What about that? Where's our women? Where's our women? Silence. Violence against women, misogyny, and patriarchy are perpetually institutionalized through the systematic erasure of the memory and contributions of women in socio-economic and political revolutions. We are made to believe that liberation struggles are the product and field of elite great men only. As a result, history and biographical memory becomes constructed in such a manner that it reflects only a male-dominated theater. On the 4th of March 1966, the then Minister of Justice B.J. Foster received a defiant letter with the following words. I quote, "I wish to write to you as I'm worried about the health of my husband, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. When I visited him on Robert Island in January, I saw that his health had deteriorated. I know his health better than anyone else. I cannot accept that he is receiving the best possible medical and other treatments." These were the defiant words of an indomitable woman, a woman of courage, a woman of determination and immeasurable endurance, a forgotten woman who has been largely relegated to the periphery of our imagination, the margins of national memory and consciousness. Ma Zondeni Veronica Sobukwe. Just 2 weeks ago, on the 27th of July, Mama Sobukwe celebrated her 90th birthday anniversary, celebrating 9 decades of a life filled with joy, laughter, pain, and struggle. As usual, she celebrated her birthday in private. At a humble home in Graaff-Reinet, with family and close friends. There were no journalists, no glamour, no live broadcast, but the tragedy here is that most people in this country are not even aware that Umama Sobukwe is still alive. Mama Sobukwe was born on the 27th July 1927 to Mama Kate Mate and Baba Stini Mate in Vryheid, KwaZulu-Natal. Zondeni Veronica Mate was the second eldest of 4 daughters. Her sibling sisters were Hilda, the eldest, followed by Gertrude, born after Zobeli, and Bemba Florence as the youngest of the Mate daughters. Their father, Stevie, was a mine worker at Tobani, where he also acquired an old farmstead, while their mother worked as a local teacher until she was unfairly dismissed by the then racist authorities. As in most African families, at the humble farmstead, the Mates lived together with a number of extended family relatives. Siyakwazi lokho Africa. That's how we were brought up. It was here at a home that Umama Zondeni first experienced the institutions of racism. You can imagine at that age. As the racist Satan regime ordered for the eviction of a family from their home under the pretext of a safety law, her family was evicted from their homestead and they were allocated what was then referred to as Iscom Plus, a small little room divided with bricks and cloths in which the whole family was cramped. As children, they overheard conversations and understood the frustrations of their parents resulting from this racist eviction. Although dispossessed of their homestead, their parents still retained and owned a number of cattle, and each of the 4 girls were responsible for their own number of cattle, and woke up daily to first send the cattle for grazing both before attending school. Their parents were strict and taught their girls to be responsible and self-reliant from the early ages of 5 years. When they left home and went into boarding school at the mission school, their parents continued to ensure that they could stand for themselves by refusing to buy them casual clothes, with the exception of school uniform. They had to work part-time jobs in the local community to get money to buy casual clothes for themselves. This is where the seeds of Umama Sobukwe's self-determination, resilience, and leadership qualities were planted. She left boarding school and went to study nursing at the Victoria Hospital in Lovedale College. Owing to her supreme wit and intelligence at Lovedale, Umama Sobukwe gracefully excelled in her studies and became a notable figure amongst her peers. Disgruntled with the abject conditions black nurses were subjected to at the training school, she became one of the leaders that organized and led a nurses' strike at the Victoria Hospital in 1947. When one of them was summarily expelled, she took over and brought the nursing college to a standstill by demanding her unconditional reinstatement. Is that not leadership, Ma-Africa? Yes. They caught the attention of the world, exposing the horrid conditions young African women trainees were being subjected to. Owing to her seasoned leadership qualities and her prominence in the role she played in the struggle, she was one of the representatives of nursing students delegated to meet and discuss the substantive issues behind the nursing strike with Utate Walter Sisulu, the then Secretary General of the African National Congress. It was through her activism in this nursing strike that the young Zondeni Veronica met Utata Robert Mamadiso Sobukwe. Utata Robert Sobukwe was the president of the Students' Representative Council at Fort Hare University College at the time. During the strike, Utata Sobukwe, Uba Sobukwe came to address the striking nurses, and romantic sparks, flew between the two. It must be understood that they met as equals in the heat of the struggle for national liberation. Springfield Hospital and later at McCourt Hospital. From here, she was further stationed at Ladysmith, working as a nurse. On the other hand, Ubao Mangaliso was completing his studies at Fort Hare, and thereafter he proceeded to teach at Standerton. Umama Sobukwe and Ubao Sobukwe relocated to Johannesburg when he was offered a post as a lecturer in African Studies at Wits University. On the 6th of June in 1954, the young couple got married at St. Paul's Anglican Church here in Jabavu, Soweto, and in line with African tradition and matrimonial rites of passage, she received the customary nuptial name of Nosango. The couple moved into a mother's house at 1526 B White City, Jabavu, in Soweto. After 9 months, they were located their own municipal house at 684 Mufulo Village, not far from where we are. Shortly before they moved into their new house, their first child, a daughter named Miliswa, was born. Then shortly before they moved into the new house at Mufulo, their first son, Jimmy Lesizwe, was born. And finally, twin boys, the now late Dani Jebo and Dani Zizwe was forever born. She resumed work in between having the children, doing general district nursing and working as a midwife around Soweto. But their young marriage was to be tormented by the brutality of the racist regime, hell-bent on destroying African families and resistance, and protecting interests of European settlers. The Sobukwes got involved in numerous episodes of the struggle at their house in Mufulo. The historic events of the 21st of March 1960 marked a turning point, not only in the history of this country, but also in the family life of the Sobukwes. There is no need to recite the events of that historic day, as is already known. Sobukwe was arrested, Ubao Sobukwe was arrested following the Pan-Africanist Congress's positive action campaign against past laws that resulted in the Sharpeville massacre. He was subsequently sentenced to 3 years at labor at the Pretoria Central Prison. The love and affection that Mangaliso had for Umama Sobukwe was expressed in one painful letter he wrote on the 26th of March 1963, just a few months before he was scheduled to complete his sentence and be released on the 3rd of May 1963. In his letter from Pretoria Central, he wrote, I quote, "Since my future is still so uncertain, I thought I should take this opportunity to tell you just how much your courage and love have meant to me during all these years of my imprisonment. Human nature is not a queer thing, darling. It is quite possible that after a time I may forget what you suffered on my behalf. That is why I want you to have this written testimony from me so that we both of us can go back to it in the future. I just wish to say that you have been a magnificent woman, a magnificent wife, and a magnificent mother. You have been everything I would have wished my wife to be. Indeed, on the date of my companion's release, after serving 3-year sentence and unknown to Umama Wetu, Mamzondeni, who had prepared a homecoming feast to celebrate his release, Mama, they understand this very well. Sure. I think at this point in time. This is the time when we have to reflect deep into our own situations, to reflect deep into our homes, to reflect deep into our country of what is going on. Oh Mama, oh Tata, I know you are always there. Mangaliso Sobukwe was secretly flown into Robben Island, blindfolded, where he was further detained until Parliament made a law in his name. The infamous Sobukwe clause to incarcerate him indefinitely. The official excuse given by the racist Foster was that nothing indicated to him that Sobukwe had changed his views or intentions, and that if he were released, he would continue organizing the revolution. On Robben Island, Ubawo Sobukwe was isolated and kept in solitary confinement. He was regarded as the most dangerous man. The most dangerous man in South Africa. And the only people who were able to speak to were his white prison guards, who were also under orders not to speak to him. He was only allowed a few monitored visits by close family and friends. Umama Sobukwe visited her husband as often as she could be allowed. And indeed, when the government announced that she and the children could be allowed, in addition to their normal visits, to live with him on Robben Island twice a year for 14 days at a time, she became a voluntary prisoner. That is how deep Umama Sobukwe's love was towards Utata Sobukwe, not Utata, Ubawo Sobukwe. He even went to squat on the Robben Island to be with Ubawo Sobukwe. In between all this, their children had a shuttle between two worlds, the world of prison and the world of borrowed nomad. You can imagine, and the child must, we expect the child to be normal. In another emotional and touching letter written by Umama Sobukwe, while incarcerated in solitary confinement on Robben Island, Ubawo Sobukwe was a book writer, and by the way, he was a professor. This is the one time, now I'm quoting Ubawo. This is the one time that I'm indeed grieved, that I'm not around to express my thanks and appreciation of you as a wife and mother. I have said it before, and I repeat it boldly and gratefully, that you are a chosen among the chosen. Really? I'm not going to attend that restaurant. No. And we've come a long way together. And we've watched each other grow and mature. And we have watched the children God has blessed us with grow. Yeah? And he still continues. We occupied a building in Mufolo and turned it into a home. You denied yourself Lazarus and worked uncomplainingly to achieve this. The children and I thank you and bless you. You've been a widow now for over 6 years, but you've been a father and a mother, both to our children. He still continues, he says, you've been regular in your visits to me throughout my years as a convict, right up to the present day, ever dignified, calm and cool, ever uncomplaining, never whining. You've had your share of sorrow, but it has not been in vain. You've discovered new and true friends in quarters that you did not expect. You've come to know yourself, to know what you can bear. What? I will say to you more personally. meet, you know. My heart is full because I've come to know what a great woman you are, the true embodiment of African womanhood. Unbowed and undeterred, she fiercely challenged Foster. Give me Africa, oh, never firstly, about the injustice of Sobukwe's indefinite detention. Yes, it's too much. And later about the conditions surrounding my husband's incarceration on Robben Island. She requested several meetings with authorities, which were never honored. Her agitations against the dehumanizing thrust of the apartheid regime began to take the form of converting letters that spoke truth to power. Around 1964, Mama Sobukwe risked arrest by skipping the country to Basutoland, presently known as Lesotho, to visit two victims of a car bombing that was commissioned and executed by the apartheid regime and their agents. The two victims of the bomb attacks were Comrade Sipho Richard Shabalala and Comrade Sulu Soyizwepi. They are both PAC leaders and activists in their rights. Both persons are still alive today in Durban and Mthatha, respectively. The two were admitted unconscious in Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Marseille. Professor Sipho Shabalala remembers the event as follows. Quote, being visited and comforted by Prof's wife, Umama Sobukwe, was a very heaven to us. Revolutionary speaking, I shall never forget her courage. We were bound to heal against all odds. But one could not die after such a visit. They got healed in the presence As the Sobukwe clause was reviewed and renewed annually by Parliament, Mama Sobukwe wrote to the then woman parliamentarian, Helen Suzman, requesting her to ask certain questions about her husband's incarceration before Parliament. In a letter to Helen Suzman dated 15th of April 1965, she wrote, I quote, Dear Mrs. Suzman, I write this letter to you in your triple capacity as a woman, as a mother, and as a parliamentarian of outstanding competence, whose integrity is impeccable, and one who has made a name for herself as a uniting champion of liberty and justice for all men, irrespective of race, color, or creed. It is not my intention to go into the aspects of my husband's present position, as this is well known to you. What I'm writing to you about is to make certain requests concerning his future on Robben Island. As you will know, the question of my husband's detention comes up for yearly review in May, and I wish to ask you to ask certain questions in Parliament. Firstly, how long it is intended to keep him on the island, and whether in view of his conduct and his health, it would not be possible to transfer him to a place of detention on the mainland. Second, what the state of his health is, and if it could be possible to arrange for regular visits by an independent doctor and reports submitted to the authorities and to his family. I'm aware of the prevailing atmosphere and that this stand will call for courage, but feel that this would be a humanitarian act of the highest order and I have full confidence that you will not let me down at this time of hardship and trials for me and my children. Umama ucela omunye umama oseduze nabo BJ Foster ukuba ake abeke isikhalazo sika bawo wethu kuba mhlophe. Suzman heeded to Mama Sobukwe's request and made a number of submissions before Parliament, questioning and challenging Sobukwe's incarceration. Foster and the racist regime remained cold, determined to keep Sobukwe until the side of eternity. They said Sobukwe had not changed his views, still determined in his quest for the restoration of the land and dignity of dispossessed African people. Africa, this was acknowledged by BJ Foster. Ukuba Utata Sobukwe is not the guy to be bought with silver coin. Utata Sobukwe stood for us. If he was here with us, we're not going to be what we are today. Later on, another Minister of Justice justified the continued detention of Uba Sobukwe on the grounds that he had refused to change his politicized determination to free African people. The Imvo newspaper publication of March 18, 1988 described Mama Sobukwe's political role in the struggle as follows. I quote, unkosikazi uSobukwe kwentetho yakhe ukuthaze amakhosikazi ukuba asoloko emanyane nabayeni bawo ekuzabalazeni inkululeko ye-Azania. Mrs. Sobukwe encouraged women to be united with their men in the fight for the freedom of Azania. So in other words, Mama Sobukwe never said, oh women, they will lead. He said, both of us, we must support each other. Oh mama, no dad. So we must take it from there as African women. In the Drum publication of June 1978, Stan Mujwadi wrote, I quote, otherwise Veronica, as she was affectionately known, to be in support of her husband and the political struggle, managed to keep in the background, close quote. Speaking to Stan in that publication, she said, I quote, you should by now know that I do not like publicity. I always shunned it. In fact, my husband did not like publicity either. My ambition to see my children grow the way their father did, I want them to be as simple as he was. They must follow in his footsteps. This shunning of publicity by the Sobukwe is elsewhere acknowledged by Uba Mangaliso himself, confiding in an interview to Benjamin Pogrund that my wife is not concerned about material things. You know her well to know that. Close quote. Shying away from publicity was and is not equal to political importance. To the contrary, Mama Sobukwe was tired of the media's bias in reporting about her husband and took a conscious political decision to refrain from publicity. Mama has avoided publicity because she believes that you cannot be built by the press in a cause of freedom. She is definitely not a celebrity type of personality. Her several letters to Foster requesting for interviews and meetings with him were all turned down. As health practitioner and as an activist in her own right, she single-handedly advocated for the release of Uba Sobukwe by highlighting the plight of his declining health. And when all her efforts failed, she appealed to Foster to allow Uba Sobukwe to leave South Africa permanently on an exit permit together with his family. Foster still refused. And Umama Sobukwe asked that she be allowed to stay on Robben Island with Sobukwe to oversee his health herself. Of of course, this request too was denied. Early in 1969, Ubao Robert Mamadiso Sobukwe was released from Robben Island, taken on the prison ferry boat to Cape Town on the mainland, and from here he was driven for about 1,000 kilometers to his new prison, a house at number 6 Naledi Street at Khalishiwe, Kimberley, where he was banished under house arrest with his family until his untimely death in 1978. After Ubao Sobukwe died, Umama Sobukwe's struggles and battles with the authorities continued. Just a few days after her husband's funeral, the racist government threw her out of the house at number 6 Naledi Street, where her husband was banished. What cruelty! The imprisonment, banishment, and eventual death that the Sobukwe suffered turned Umama Sobukwe into a targeted woman, making it difficult for her to access basic necessities such as a home for herself and her children. A government spy who was assigned to keep check on them was given that house by the same racist regime, probably as a reward after having done a good job. After Ubao Solekile, Babnikeza Leon Tata years of gift. She then moved to Graafrenet, where Ubao Sobukwe was born and raised after the funeral in March 1978. In 1985, tragedy continued to follow Umama Wetu Sobukwe. Her sister Vemba Florence Ribeiro, the youngest of the 4 martyred daughters, was honeycombed with bullets near home in Mamelodi, Pretoria, by the South African Civil Cooperation Bureau military of Death Squad, together with her medical doctor husband, Ubao Fabian Defu Ribeiro. Many people are not aware that Umama Florence Ribeiro was in fact Umama Sobukwe's younger sister. The couple supported the Sobukwe family during the hard times and was spotted for murder by the racist regime. Umama Sobukwe continued to enjoy this pain without ever thinking of giving up the struggle. Celebrating 90 years for Mama Sobukwe is a major feat. Hers is a sterling life, which is exemplary for all, young and old, men and women, that one can serve, suffer, and sacrifice for the freedom of the Azanian masses. Both of them, Umama Zondeni and Ubao Mamadiso Sobukwe, have committed body and soul to the concept of genuine leadership in the struggle and have used the description as an epitaph in the grave of Ubao Sobukwe. Despite the hardships she was subjected to, she has not wavered in a commitment to the ideals for which Sobukwe was known for. Allow me to conclude with a few lines from a tribute poem by the late Ndate Ezekiel Mpahlele, as to reflect on why Mama Sobukwe is the embodiment of the motto, serve, suffer, sacrifice. Ndate Mpahlele writes, I quote, "You were there with him, daughter of Africa, at the banging and clanging of prison doors and gates. There in the busy wards, where your man lay listening to the ravished beat of his pain. The ebb or flow of life from a body, always waiting for someone's paperwork. Someone counting time for a man's life. He would never grasp. You had been there to witness it all. Men fixed on a course to set black humanity free. A man breasting the hills and breaking his feet on rocky road, from college to stockade, to the end of his life. Then at last, daughter, of Mate. The sun came out of you and your children, blazing from above the eastern skyline, lightening your way through the darkness of your journey. Always you were reminded this, that no one in all of savage Christendom could break your man's mind and spirit, or trample on sanctity of your home, divine gift of the Supreme One, attended by the ancestors. We salute you, daughter of Africa, devoted wife and mother, who turned pain into an ever-glowing shrine. We salute you, mother of Azania, Ilfeletu,